If this works, I'm gonna be very disappointed because that's not what I told everybody. So if it goes out on YouTube, it'll be on YouTube, but it won't be for anybody else, and they won't be able to see it. They won't know where we are.
Mm.
And watch this. I bet you pop right up. Pop right up.
Mm.
Well, anyway, I'm gonna do what I normally do, and we'll get it on Facebook. We're not gonna do it on Facebook because I can't get it. So let me do what I normally do and welcome everybody to the show. Okay, I am your host, the Reverend Dr. J. Lauren Russell, and you are listening to and watching Matters of Faith, the radio show. My guests are already with me, and so they are going to be watching as we introduce the show. Matters of Faith is a show designed to bring issues of interest to you, the listening audience, that will not only challenge, encourage, motivate, and stimulate you, but also encourage, motivate, and inspire you to keep the faith. I am your host, the Reverend Dr. J. Lauren Russell, and it's my job to engage you in dialogue, stimulating dialogue that's inspiring, encouraging, motivating, conversations that will help you build your determination, your commitment, and your character, conversations that will help you keep the faith. Now, everyone born of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. And now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is time for Matters of Faith, the radio show. So let me give you a little bit of background information on how Matters of Faith operates so that you'll know what you're looking at and you'll know how we're going to function this moment going forward. Matters of Faith comes on every Monday night from 8 to 10 p.m. We normally broadcast on Facebook Live, but I wasn't able to connect. So tonight we're broadcasting on YouTube. Matters of Faith is sponsored by the JLR Company, and that's the company that you need to choose for all your church financial consulting needs. We specialize in financial analysis, loan packaging, property development, financial workshops and seminars, trustee and financial training, capital campaigns, evangelism training, benefit packaging, and pastoral coaching, as well as life, health, disability, and annuity products and services, all available to you by calling 718 328 8096. That's 718 328 8096. With the JLR Company, it's not about the castle, it's about the kingdom. And don't forget to get your copy of Matters of Faith, the book. Matters of Faith, the book can be purchased at my Cash App, which is $ Matters of Faith. And if you want to do something even more interesting, just go to www.smashwords.com. I'll put that on the screen for you later on. And if you use the coupon that's there, the book is $15 because there's a 25% discount coupon if you decide to use it. And there's no shipping and no handling. Neighbors Home Care of the Bronx has paused hiring as we go through this coronavirus pandemic. But if you're a certified home health aide or a certified personal care worker or desire to be licensed as one, give them a call and get on their preferred list. Call 718-515-2200. 718-515-2200. Call today and tell them that you heard about it on Matters of Faith, the radio show, and they'll put you on the preferred list. Okay? Now, having said all of that, I hope you had an opportunity to go to www.thebronxchronicle.com. Scroll down until you find my column, Matters of Faith. And once you find that column, then you can read the article. It is entitled Choices. www.thebronxchronicle.com. Scroll down until you find my column, Matters of Faith. There you will find my article for today's subject, Choices. I'm going to read the article now. I'll read it a couple of times during the course of the show. And also, I'm going to give you a challenge question. I'm going to ask you a question because I really want you to be involved. And what you can do is you can type, you can text, you can send me a message to let me know what your thoughts are concerning the question, and that you can become involved in the conversation as well. So here's the article for the first read. Joshua 24:15 from the New King James Version. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Choices. Life is full of choices. Every day we must make choices. In fact, everything we do requires a choice. Choices describe our past, define our present, and determine our future. Joshua, after the death of Moses, rose as the leader of the Israelites. It was he who led them through much of their wilderness experience. Because he is now an old man and nearing death, he gives them some sage advice. In fact, he reminds them, despite their continual disobedience, their murmuring, and their complaining, it was the Lord's choice to provide for their every need throughout their 40 years of wandering. They had not made good choices, but the Lord was gracious to them. Now, as they readied themselves to enter the promised land, the Lord gives them the ability to choose. And from that moment forward, the condition of their lives will be dependent on their making good choices. Choosing has not changed much since Joshua shared his wise words of instruction. The condition of our lives today is also contingent on the choices we make. Even simple choices, like what to wear, what to eat, or how to spend our money, take their place in the condition of our lives. The year 2020 has been a year like none other. Not only are we living through a COVID-19 pandemic where hundreds of thousands of people have died already, some people are choosing not to wear personal protective gear that significantly impact the condition of our lives. There are two other significant choices we are asked to make in 2020 that will impact the condition of our lives for years to come. One is the census, and the other, the general election. A census was taken by Moses and Aaron in the wilderness of Mount Sinai, actually, so that they would know how many people over the age of 20 were in each of the 12 tribes of Israel. That information was used to fairly distribute property when they entered the promised land. Today, the census is taken so that the distribution of federal money is dispersed according to the numbers. If people are undercounted in a jurisdiction, that money is lost for the next decade. A decision must be made by each individual living in these United States of America to participate or not in the census. The history of this nation proves that the more participatory people are in the process, the more equality is achieved throughout the country. And every 4 years, a general election is held to determine who is going to be the commander in chief of the United States. It is a process that allows the people to elect delegates from each state who will then cast their vote for the candidate they have committed to support. And for this electoral process to work impartially, all eligible voters must choose to participate. I liken this year 2020 to the time Joshua challenged the Israelites to choose whom they were going to serve. The Lord gave them the choice. Of himself and his family, Joshua firmly declared that they would serve the Lord. We have several choices before us today. Are we going to choose to follow the guidelines given to us by our medical professionals? Are we going to choose to be counted in the census so that our communities are not shortchanged when the funds are distributed for everything from education to revitalization? Are we going to choose to vote so that our voices are heard and our opinions matter? The Lord gave us the ability to choose. It is our God given privilege. Joshua elevated his choice to the ultimate level when he said to the children of Israel, "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." The choice is yours. Okay, that's the question. Or that's not the question, that's the article, the first read for tonight. And I want to ask you a question. And this question is going to drive our conversation tonight with my panelists, but also for those of you who are watching live on YouTube. Okay, sorry about the Facebook, YouTube, but here we go. In what ways is choosing to participate in the census and voting both a civic duty and a theological mandate? Let me ask it again. In what ways is choosing to participate in the census and voting both a civic duty and a theological mandate? Okay, that's the question. Y'all ready for that? My guest tonight, and I gotta share a screen. I gotta let you guys see who these people are. These are some great dynamic individuals whom I want to introduce to you. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and then this way you can see what I see. All right? You see the picture. You see the picture. Now I'm gonna sort of turn my attention just for a moment because I really want you to see what I see. All right? I want you to see what I see. Now, this got some good stuff for you, but I want to introduce you to first Nancy. Nancy Pascal is a New York City Census 2020 She is the, I can't see that. I know it's there, but I gotta move it.
Faith
Nancy, you can jump
manager,
in. What is it?
the faith manager.
Thank you, the faith manager. I got your pictures kind of covered it up, so I'm sorry about that. She comes from the Mayor Centers for Faith and Community Partnerships, over 10 years of citywide constituent services, and 3 years working citywide with faith leaders across the city. And Nancy is not she's not a first time guest. She's been on my show before, but I had to have her come back because of the fact that what we're talking about is so critical and the time is so limited. We don't have a lot of time, so we must move expeditiously to get the information out. And the other person I want to introduce to you is Karen Collins. Karen is the daughter of a Presbyterian pastor who grew up hearing about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the movement for civil and human rights um, throughout her college career. Let me move this back over because I can't see it. So y'all have to bear with me because I can't read it because the picture's there. Since college, she has been involved in working for justice by participating in the anti-Vietnam War protests, Central America Solidarity Work, supporting Jesse Jackson's campaign for president in 1984, and the peace movement. Professionally, she has devoted her career to children, both with national advocacy organizations and then in the New York City public school system as a teacher in Manhattan and an elementary school principal in Mott Haven in the South Bronx. I got to ask you about that because I'm really curious about that. I'm a Bronxite. Now retired, she is excited to be working with the Poor People's Campaign to address the evils of poverty, racism, ecological devastation, and militarism and the war economy. Karen is an active member of St. Paul and St. Andrew United Methodist Church on West 86th Street in Manhattan. So I want to welcome the two of you. We got two other guests who will join us in about 30 minutes, but I wanted to make sure that I brought the two of you in so that everybody would know who you are, and then we can start our conversation, and they can jump in whenever they can. It's kind of like, they can get in whenever they can. So, Nancy, since I introduced you first, I want you to just sort of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Well, so you said it all. My name is Nancy Pascal. I work with the New York City Census as the faith manager. I come out of the mayor's Center for Faith and Community Partnerships, but I'm right now devoted all of my time to the census. Um, and in terms of your question, um, I would say that theologically, I may not be the best person to ask, but in working with faith leaders across the city, one thing is for certain. And when I say faith leaders, I'm saying all houses of worship. The commonality that I've seen has been a dedication to the community, a dedication to people who have less than,
Hmm.
and a dedication to knowing that if others are suffering, you know, there needs work to be done.
Yeah.
I have found that through faith, that's where you find the movers, the shakers, the people, the civil rights movement was based on a lot of people of faith. Let's just put it that way. Malcolm, Martin, they come out of houses of worship. So I think that they're tied together.
Hmm.
Um, you were able to quote the census in the Bible. It's also in the Torah. Numbers is very important. So I think in terms of uh, choosing to participate in the census, and as your civic duty is also a moral duty when it comes to faith leaders. And I think Karen can even add to that with all the work that she's been doing as well. I think she might agree with me, but have a more articulate way of saying it, and maybe quote some stuff. But I really find that it is actually tied to houses of worship. People of faith are tied to civic duty. They're actually tied to making sure the community is thriving. They're there for their community at their saddest and happiest hour. So that's what I would say. The census is about community. The census is about funding in your own community. Um, we were hoping as the city to increase the numbers like never before. And due to COVID, it has been a struggle just getting the message out. But the census is about power in your community. It is about being seen. It's about funding. It's about you and I go to the same school, we bring our children. If you didn't do the census and I did, our children have to share resources. So it is really, really important that the community not just do the census, but understand why they're doing it. And I think houses of worship play a great part in educating the community.
Well, that's good. I appreciate that. It's interesting that you should say that because, for the history of the nation, particularly as we came out of the slavery era of the country and we went into, our freedom years, the church, especially in the Black community, has played a significant role in dispersing of information to its community. Think we might have lost some of that luster over the years. And I certainly want Karen to speak to that because her experience in, with her background and her dad's background, and certainly, hearing about and dealing with Martin Luther King and the work that she's already done, I'm sure she can add something to that, as you said, that will enlighten us even more. So, Karen, I want you to unmute yourself and just give us a little background on what's going on in your life and tell us a little bit about you beyond what I was able to read off of the page.
Well, thank you very much, Reverend Russell. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate meeting Nancy. I'm so appreciative of the work she's doing. It's Yo People's work right now, such important work. What you read is pretty much me. I have devoted my life to working on behalf of children in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've done that because I love kids, but I've also done that because I think it's strategic. Children are our future, and we need to ensure that all children have everything they need to live to their potential in this world. And education is a big part of that. Childcare is a big part of that. Supporting
Yeah.
families is a big part of that. So that's the other big piece of me, I think, is that I've always worked with and for and on behalf of children. Um, and right now I'm choosing to do my work in with my local church, and a couple of other ways, but very, very, very much so with the Poor People's Campaign,
Right.
because I really do believe that what the Poor People's Campaign is about, building a movement that is a very big tent of poor people, low income people, and people of conscience, that this movement, in partnership with all the other organizations and work that's being done, good work that's being done on specific issue areas, we have the power and we have the potential to change the society if we claim that power, if we become a movement, if we overcome the differences that the ways in which the society is trying to divide us and keep us apart from one another. And in terms of, the civic duty, I think, I support everything that Nancy said. It's very, and I think it also for me, I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, Nancy, but the census also determines our representation in our government, which is crucial. I mean, if people don't get out there and fill out their census forms, we could potentially lose some of the numbers of people that we have in the House of Representatives. And that's something that we cannot afford to do. We're having a hard enough time right now under this administration getting what we need out of Washington. We cannot in any way jeopardize that. In terms of the religious involvement, yeah, I mean, I again totally agree with Nancy. I think that the church has always been, and not just churches, but houses of worship, different religious bodies have been fundamental to some of the changes in our society. And I know the Bible best because I come out of the Christian tradition. was
Mhm.
brought up in the Christian tradition, but I know enough about Judaism and um, the Muslim faith and a little bit about other faiths to know that at our center, all of us share a kind of moral mandate, a kind of belief in a higher power and belief in the importance of equity and dignity and human rights. And so, yes, um, religious bodies historically and today have a huge role to play in making sure that our societies serve people in the best possible way.
And I appreciate both of you. And the reason I sort of asked the question the way I did when I'm praying about it, really contemplating it, is because of the not just the moral and the civic duty, but there's a mandate that we have to be. The Bible says it well. It says you are be, in the world, but not of the world, right? So we live in the world, so we can't avoid participating in the nuances or the systems of the world, but it's our responsibility to make those systems work for the benefit of all, the collective all. And so those of us who in the field of faith, I want to call it in the areas of faith, whether you're part of an organized church or organized institution, if you're a person of faith, then you're charged with that same as you had said, Karen, that same moral obligation, that same spiritual obligation to make things better, not just for you, but for those who come behind you, those who stand beside you. And these things that we have in place, that they were designed by man, but I believe they were inspired by God. The election process, the way in which they do it, can be a very good way to do it. Has been for a few hundred years. We've lived like this. And the census, obviously, the way you count the people and disperse money is a good system, but it has to be used. And sometimes we don't use the systems that we have available to us. And what happens is the system becomes a burden. So Nancy, I'm gonna get back to you for a second because there was something that you said, and I have some questions specifically for both of you that I was kind of gleaning and listening to you. I'm trying to let everybody know we're on YouTube, by the way, so I'm trying to multitask because I have to tell everybody that I've changed direction. We're on a different street. But Nancy, you have some things that you got going on right now because we're in crunch time. I mean, we're in the last quarter. We ain't got but a few minutes to play. So what are some of the things that the Census Bureau is doing to get folks to get counted? What are some of those strategies that you're putting out there now?
So the census has been working tirelessly throughout. I've been working for the census since last November. Right now, we are in crunch time. We thought we had until October 31st, and the president actually has changed our time to September 30th. So we're at the end of our time. And so what I'm going to say is that we are in a critical time. And so if I could just open up my view, I could show you,
I'll share. Hold on a second.
no, I can see it. And I have to put on my glasses because there is so much going on.
Hold
If
on.
you want to reach,
I have to stop my share for a moment.
no need. I found it.
Oh,
I
you
found
did.
it. But right now, let me start off by saying where we are as a city. So as of Friday, September 11th, the Bronx was at 60.1%. Brooklyn is at 56.2%. Manhattan is at 60.4%, Queens at 60.3%, and Staten Island at 64.3%. So Staten Island is in the lead with 64.3%. And what I'll say is that just imagine if that is what you're deciding you want your salary to be cut. You don't want 100% of your salary. You want 64.3% of your salary. New York State self-response rate is 62.3%. So New York City alone has lost 20 hospitals in 20 years. And we are due to lose um, 2 more congressmen. New York has also lost nearly 40% of their congressmen in the past 70 years. So whereas we had over 40 congressmen, we're in the 20s with the amount of congressmen that we have. So these are electoral votes that we're losing. The census is so critical in counting everyone so that you can build the schools that you may need. For 0 to 5 is the least counted. So it's one of the reasons why you'll find overcrowding. A lot of the issues that we have are due to the census and due to an undercount.
Undercount.
So just to give you a sense, Texas has spent $0 on the census for its community, $0. New York City has been working with the US Census to really get out this count as best as possible. And even during COVID, it was nonstop. We've reached over 1 million New Yorkers. We got on the phones and we've been texting and doing predictive dialers, texting out the count and engaging. We have had great and amazing community partners from all walks of life, representing as many countries, languages, ethnicities as we could find to work alongside us as validators and working in the community. And so now it's, this is the last push. We are asking everyone to get out there. And the least you can do is call 5 people make sure they've done the census, and then ask them to call 5 people. But you can join us in volunteering your time from the safety of your home to join any of our calls. We're on the phone every day. So there's no social distancing fears necessary. So I did put that in the chat with the email address where you can volunteer. We have an amazing field team that is taking on hundreds of city volunteers. We also have an NYC Counts. It's a census contest to mobilize New Yorkers to self-respond. The contest closes on Monday, September 21st. So New Yorkers who complete the census by then will be eligible to win exciting prizes from Lyft, Seamless. The Seamless is giving, I believe, $1,000 gift certificate. Lyft, I believe, is giving some major discounts. So there's some amazing contests, and you can go to nyc.gov /census contest to get on that. And, if you want to reach out to me, and I will say this, I feel like I should write it all out, but you can reach me at npascal@census.nyc.gov if you're interested in me pushing you along to the volunteer team if you didn't get that.
Okay, would you give it to them again real slow so that we make sure they get a chance to write it down, so that they'll have it in front of them. So give your email address again to them.
So it's N as in Nancy, and then Pascal, P as in Peter, A, S as in Sam, CAL, @census.nyc.gov. And you can also, go right onto our website and hit how can I get involved? And that's nyccensus.gov. And I will put that back.
That's on the screen right now.
Yes. Oh, perfect. You can go right onto there, and you can also just volunteer right from that spot. So we are also going to have many events coming down the pipe, starting on the 16th. through the last 10 days. So starting maybe actually from the 16th to the 21st, we're gonna have a lot of kickoff events, so keep an ear to the ground. And up until the last day of the census, we will be on the ground. We'll be looking for people to come out and encourage people to do the census and really amplify the census in the community.
Now, Nancy, you had said something. I'm a numbers guy. So the statistics scare me because at 64%, that's what Staten Island is doing, right?
Right.
Karen, you're a school teacher. If your students getting 64, that's failing. That's a failing grade. You don't get promoted with a 64. So how can we move forward with anything that we have on our quote unquote agenda if we're failing? I mean, I don't, I was talking to a friend today, chatted about something. She says, well, and this is probably in your line right now, because, well, I'm not going to vote. I almost lost it. I said, no, you can't not vote. I'm double negative. You can't not vote. You must vote. You must be counted in the census. That's a no. That's a no. There's no option with that. We must be counted because we lose. And I got to say this because the theological perspective is really what's interesting to me, and that's what kind of caught her as well. That this is not just a civic and a moral obligation. It is a God-given privilege to have a choice, to be able to choose to participate in the census, to be able to choose to participate and not, right? But when you participate, then you are actually, you're saying to Lord, thank you for giving me the ability to choose. And because my choice, particularly as it relates to the census, my choice benefits my entire community. So I can be more than just an individual. I'm a collective in this. Every single person matters. Every single person. And it's 64%. It frightens me. Now, as a piece of information, just as a piece of information, I ran for public office. I didn't win, but I ran. Well, here in the South Bronx where I live, there are 72,000 registered voters in this area, in the area that I ran in. The person who won had 1,400 votes. That doesn't even make sense. No sense whatsoever. And what I'm really pointing to, I guess, is the apathy that has been allowed to permeate our community. And by the way, I'm not letting the churches off the hook because we dropped the ball where we used to be, and institutions of faith were so instrumental in making sure that these things took place. And somehow or another, we're standing at the back of the line watching other people lead. And of course, the people are dying. Literally, 180,000 plus, and we're still counting. Because we're not leading in a way that we've been ordained to lead. And Karen, you can probably speak to that because your daddy was a Presbyterian minister, and I know he talked about that a lot because that was a part of his theology. I didn't read it there, but I could see it in your face.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And it's interesting, the Poor People's Campaign recently did a study about voting, but I think that it sort of relates to census as well. And they said, why is it that so many folks are not voting? And we could probably say the same thing about the census, like
Right.
so many people are not filling out their census, And one of the things that we found was that people feel like society is not taking care of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've lost interest in taking part in that society, that if they're not really, if I'm not hearing people talking about me, like getting a job, having an income that can support my family, et cetera, then is that really something that's worth my while?
Right.
And that we have to, as a society, in this moment, I think, help people understand, yes, absolutely, you have a role. Your role is very important. But if people don't believe that, it's hard to, it's a harder sell. But
It's-
may I ask Nancy
Sure,
a question?
please.
Nancy, what is the issue? Because I know there's been a lot of efforts there were some efforts, I shouldn't say that, there have been some efforts from the administration to make undocumented folks feel like they would be in jeopardy if they filled out the census. Is that, to what extent is that true?
Well, I think just challenging and saying that they wanted to put a citizenship question on the census in and of itself was, we believe, a way to a scare tactic. So it was never going to happen. It didn't make sense to request that, but just bringing that up made people really fearful of the census. But I will say this: we have been historically undercounted, and it's because people do not have a lot of trust in the government for good reason. And I will say that it also has to do with civics. I believe that people do say that there's apathy, but I also know that when I speak with someone and it's really clear how important the census is, people are really surprised. And I can say that because I was surprised. I had a political science degree. I was putting a son through high school. And I didn't really ever really understand how important the census was until I was working in city government and someone came and actually talked about it. So it's not really taught in a way, if you're not, in the system, really how important this is. It's census suppression. And there's a disconnect. There is a disconnect. Um, People talk about criminal justice. They march for criminal justice. They say there needs to be change in the criminal justice system, but yet people around you will be arguing with, to trying to help you get out of jury duty. The first minute you get on, you're like, oh, how can I get out of this? How can I get out of jury duty? Well, I don't want to go to jury duty. Um, it's a disconnect. Who do you think is walking through the criminal justice system, and who needs a sound mind and body to be a juror? So our civic duty should be taken a lot more seriously and understood a lot better. Being on a grand jury myself, I saw how important my role was in that space. If people truly understood that the community is being cheated out of their own money, there would be more people doing the census. But people don't understand that. They really don't. They think it's just another piece of paper, it's just another government thing, and they don't really understand the system. And to be totally honest, most people don't even understand what elected officials do. They won't be able to tell you what a congressman does versus a senator versus a city council member. And so people are afraid to say, I don't know. And they nod their head and pretend that they understand, but they really don't. It is politics. The way the government functions is a system that people need to learn and understand, which is why the census was so important to me, to share with the community, because I was shocked. I was surprised. I was so surprised that I didn't know this. And I felt like if I didn't know, I knew a lot of other people didn't know. So I think it's a lot more than just apathy. It is census suppression. The same people that don't want you to vote don't want you to do the census. This is the first time the city has actually put money into the census like this. This has never been done. This is unprecedented.
let me back up for a second because I totally agree with you. You know, back in 1980, I worked with the Census Bureau. I was a supervisor for enumerators, and I was doing it in Harlem. And there was an interesting thing that happened during that time. A homelessness was still prevalent, but there were a lot of abandoned buildings. Homeless people were living in abandoned buildings. They weren't staying in shelters. There weren't any shelters. They were staying in buildings. And one of my enumerators, who happened to be a recovering drug addict, was going into those buildings and enumerating people, and was told that those numbers wouldn't count because they don't have addresses. And I argued that. I said, no, no, no. He's doing his job, because at that point they were paid by the numbers. I said, no, he's doing his job. He's actually going and he's finding these people. So I did a survey. I went out as a supervisor and I went to some of these places and they were right there. So he literally got more numbers than anybody else in that CA building on 125th Street where Bill Clinton moved his office to. That's where we were. And he did more numbers in Harlem than any other census taker. He counted people. You see, and for me at that time, it was about, you know, I was a young kid. I was a young man. And it was important that we counted everybody, because every person counted. And if you miss them just because they don't have an address, then that means that there will be some revenue streams. There will be loss of people representing you in different places because these people just weren't counted. And by the way, as it relates to poor people, those are the ones who have no voice. They're the ones who need it the most. But they're the ones who are first taken out by the census, and then they're marginalized by society because they don't exist. They don't exist in the numbers. They look at the number, well, they're not there, right? Because they say that numbers don't lie, but people do. So they use the numbers just like people use religion to justify prejudices and to prove what they've been saying all along. Well, if you're not, and then we participate in that process by not being counted. And it doesn't matter about your citizenship. That's not the essence of it. But of course, that's not the message that is being promoted throughout our society. So people who are undocumented, people who have some issues with their residency are reluctant. And then of course, those of us who've been here for a while, we here forever, we like, no, they ain't gonna do nothing with it anyway. So we just dismiss the whole thing. And so we wind up at 60%, 57%, 40%.
And can I say something to you too?
Yeah.
Just to say, this is something I learned while working at the census from my own office. And I didn't know this, but Shirley Chisholm, as a congresswoman, was so concerned about the count in her community, she became a census enumerator.
Mm.
She counted as a congresswoman.
Yeah, because it
So,
makes it, see, when you understand it, then
yes,
you know that, see, that's
that's
why, you know, this is a
that's what I'm
forum that
saying.
I have, right? I want to use the forum because I, you know, hundreds of thousands, however many people we reach, I want to use what I have. So it doesn't, you know, everybody can do something. No one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And if everybody does something, then everything gets done. You don't have to do the heavy lifting. If you can do the sweeping, that's a part of the process. We need to make sure that we're involved in getting it done so that we don't lose what what's what we rightfully what rightfully belongs to us. Now, while we're doing that, let me I'll get you, Karen, in just a minute, okay? But let me introduce Kelly, because Kelly's on the line. All right. Kelly Smith currently serves as a national organizer for the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, where her work focuses on the more, mobilizing, organizing, registering, and educating people for a movement that votes campaign. She is also a member of the National Faith Team staff, and this is in addition to her role as the New York State Coordinating Committee and New York City Regional Committee, where, among other things, she spearheads the Faith Outreach Committee efforts. Prior to working with the Poor People's Campaign, Kelly was the manager of diversity and inclusion at the international law firm Sullivan and Cromwell, LLP, where she worked for 21 years. She left that position in July of 2018, feeling called to get in some good trouble by volunteering with the Poor People's Campaign and doing political and voter mobilization work in the months leading up to the midterm elections. Originally from Indiana, Kelly has lived in New York City since 1992. She bought in. She fell in. She bought in. She serves as a deacon at Middle Collegiate Church on the Greater Consistory for all 5 collegiate ministries. She is the proud mother of a 19-year-old son, and it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce to some and present to others Miss Kelly Smith. Kelly, by the way, I need to let you know, we are not on Facebook tonight. We had technical difficulties, so we're actually broadcasting on YouTube. So if you want to let your audience know that we're on YouTube, Matters of Faith on YouTube, please ask them to subscribe. I've been kind of multitasking, just texting everybody, just tell them to come onto YouTube. If you can do likewise, we'll still get them on that side and we'll go from there. Welcome to Matters of Faith, Kelly. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, we have someone else. Hold on for a second. Before you go to the next, let me get my next guest in, and I will introduce her also. So this young lady. Now, if I mispronounce her name, I asked her to give me just be patient with me because I might not get her name right. But I think it's Arelis. Is that the way she pronounces it? Arelis Figueroa. Originally from the Dominican Republic and currently living in New York City, Arelis is one of the tri-chairs of the New York State Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. It is a movement inspired by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Poor People's Campaign of 1968. She is also a member of the Riverside Church, where she coordinates the Latino ministry. Arelis holds a Master of Divinity from Union Theological Seminary and is on track for ordination with the United Church of Christ. She has also served as associate pastor of several congregations and works with marginalized communities on issues of housing, education, and accessibility of mental health and substance abuse services as a community activist, organizer, and certified counselor. She was a fellow graduate of the Center of Popular Education in Sao Paulo, Brazil, CESEP. She has been an advocate for the Haitian and Dominican Haitian community in the Dominican Republic, bringing health services to this impoverished and marginalized population. For the first 5 years with the Latino ministry, partnering with Fond tu Salud International, coordinating mission trips to the Dominican Haitian border. Minister Figueroa deeply believes that the gospel of Christ calls us to work for justice and peace and to build the kingdom of God in our midst. And so now I bring and introduce to some and present to others our 4th guest for tonight, Arelis Figueroa. Good evening, my dear. How are you?
Good evening.
Karen, I'm Kelly. I'm going to ask you just to give us some words from yourself, and then I'm going to come back to you, Arelis. We need to see you, so you got to take that photograph off. But we want to give you an opportunity, Kelly, to just share with us what's going on in your life beyond what I've read.
Okay. Did you read my introduction? Because I didn't hear it. Did you?
I surely did.
Oh, okay. Early on. Okay.
No,
Yeah.
just before I brought you on.
Huh?
Just before I brought you on. Just like I did Arelis.
So I didn't hear it. That's why. Okay, cool.
Everybody else did, though.
That's excellent.
We know who you are.
That's great. No, thank you so much for having me on. I am excited to be here and pumped because I just left an amazing program from 7 to 9 tonight. Voting is Power Unleashed, hosted by the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Definitely work that is passionate and important and urgent. And I'm thrilled to be associated with this campaign. I'm thrilled to be a national organizer with it and to be on the national faith team and to work locally with faith initiatives and organizing here in New York State and New York City. So just very, very happy to be here and talk about voting. This is important stuff, and the census.
Yes,
Both very important.
Well, we've been having a dynamic conversation. As I said, we ran into some technical difficulty for some reason or another. the Facebook wouldn't connect, so we had to do the alternate, go to YouTube. My YouTube is not as vibrant as my Facebook, and so I've been trying to let everybody know that we're on YouTube, that they need to subscribe and come onto that base. But we're still going to go forward one way or another. I don't care where we are, because this is an important conversation, and it'll be recorded anyway, so I can broadcast it. I can download it to Facebook so people can see it and you know, later on. But I think it's important that we have this conversation, no matter, because you know, it's funny for me, right? Whenever we run into situations like this where you have technical difficulties, then the subject matter must be really, really important,
That's right.
because Satan wouldn't rear his ugly head if it wasn't significant and important.
Yeah.
So that's why I know, you know, we're on the right track. So I'm not going to be discouraged at all. So thank you for sharing. And by the way, I do want you to prepare to give us a brief synopsis of what you guys did in that 7 to 9 meeting that you had, so that we're aware. And then, you know, you can sort of cue us in terms of what we might be able to do ourselves to engage the process so that we can get, you know, the vote out. And I know it's not New York that we're really concerned about, because there are other places in the nation that really do have issues that we need to absolutely focus on. So
I think that's true. Sorry.
Is that good? You want to say something?
Well, I just wanted to say onto that, I think that's absolutely true. But I think that, and we can talk more about this, but you know, the Poor People's Campaign approach is about getting out the vote, but it's really about organizing for the long term.
Gotcha.
And even though in New York State and in New York City, we kind of see ourselves as not a, you know, we're not a battleground state. We're not, you know, we kind of know which direction we're probably going to go. We still have elected officials that don't really represent the needs of the people.
That's very true.
And so we are about organizing people, not just to vote. Absolutely, that's the first step. Register, make a plan, vote, make sure you vote. But then also, let's hold folks accountable. Let's make our voices and our demands heard. That once we get them elected, they work for us.
Absolutely.
And so that's, you know, I think that, I guess that's just the only thing I would add to sort of the New York thing, because I think sometimes we become comfortable in New York and then we realize that administration after administration, we are still seeing way too much incarceration. We are still seeing way too much homelessness. We are fighting tooth and nail and scraping for every little, you know, sort of concession that we get. And the demands of the people aren't really being heard and implemented. So
yeah, you know, you know, poverty is a common denominator. I think we kind of agree with that poverty cuts across all racial groups, and that's what brings us together. If there was a common denominator, you know, back in the civil rights movement, it was quite obvious. It's not as obvious today, because it's not just race, although we have systemic racism that is majorly important, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. We see it now, and it's becoming, it's sort of, you know, popping out of the, coming out of the shadows, if you will, again. But poverty has been the common denominator throughout the entire process. You can go back as far back as you can, from slavery right through. Poverty has been the one thing. That's where they had peonage, and they had debtors jail, and all of same thing. And our jails proliferate with people who, for the most part, are incarcerated if you bottom it out to a large degree because of their socioeconomic status. Cyrillus, good evening. How are you? You have to unmute yourself because you're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. You're muted.
Okay.
There we go.
So thank you. I'm very excited. I was also in the meeting that Kelly just mentioned. And also I told you that yesterday in our service, the theme was our faith, our vote. So I'm very excited to be talking about this also this evening.
Good, good, very good. So there is, I don't know if I mentioned this to you when I spoke with you prior to the show. Of course, Karen and Nancy already know it, But there is a challenge question that I put up, and I always ask the challenge question to engage our audience as well, so that everybody's so like on the same page. And the question that I'm asking tonight: in what ways is choosing to participate in the census and voting both a civic duty and a theological mandate? Let me ask it again. In what ways is choosing to participate in the census and voting both a civic duty and, for us, a moral obligation and a theological mandate? So we've been talking about it for a while,
Okay.
Kelly.
I can get
So
her.
you guys now have an opportunity. To Aurelis, you're unmuted, so why don't you jump right in? How is choosing to participate in the census and voting both a civic duty and a theological mandate?
Yeah, well, the first thing that we need to remember is what is this? Like, okay, what is the census? The census determine the resources that a community will get. I think that's the best short way to put it. That means that education, health, all the major things in our life is going to be determined, or the way that we vote, or the way that we are count, or we are not count. So in that way, it is a civic duty. For us, especially for immigrants, is even more important, right? Because now people are afraid. They don't want to get. They think that they're gonna be deported if they don't have the proper documents. So for us, is yes, it's civic, because we are here, we work, we pay taxes, so we want to be counted,
Yeah.
and we want to be receive the benefit of that is also our label. Same thing with voting. Is our voice. It is our right to choose. And I read your article. It's about choosing, right? And we have that. So if we don't even have the opportunity to choose, that that is a sin. It's not theological. So for us, both are related to our faith, our moral. God, the New Testament said that I have come so you have life, and life in abundance. So, and I always say, well, life in abundance means healthcare, housing, education, pleasure, that you can go and have a little vacation with your family. So all of that, I think, is theological mandate for me.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'm multitasking, guys, but I'm listening to every word you say.
Okay.
And I'm getting some text. I told you that I was getting some text. So let me tell you one of the texts that I got so that you know what I was looking at. Um, this is from a colleague of you guys. She says, Numbers 1, 1 and 2, God told Moses to take a census.
Mm-hmm.
And then Proverbs 22 and 29 and 2, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when a wicked man rules, the people groan.
Mm.
And that's true. And so from a theological perspective, you know, to participate in the census is a right and it's a privilege, but not just that, it's a mandate, because you know Moses was told to do that, to take account of the people. And as I said before,
Mm-hmm.
he did it because, you know, in order to distribute the land properly when they were in the wilderness, he needed to know who was there. There were over 2 million
Mm-hmm.
people in that wilderness experience, and they needed to know who was there so that the land could be properly distributed. And in the New Testament, one of the reasons that Jesus went to Europe is because there was a census.
Yep.
So it's not new. This is a biblical thing that's been going on since
Mhm.
time immortal. And so it's kind of the requirement. Now, when we talk about, and I'm glad that that Akeisha brought up Proverbs 29:2, because we have the right and the privilege of selecting people to lead us. We don't have, tongue in cheek, dictators in our country. So we get a chance to choose and select. We don't want dictators in our country because it takes away the ability to choose and select. So we need to make sure that we're in a position that we maintain that privilege that God has given to us by exercising the right, the duty, and the responsibility of participating. And right now, we're talking about those two things: the right to vote and the right to be counted. Come on, Karen, jump on in. I see you chomping at the bit.
Okay,
I
I'll go after Karen.
am, because I feel like, yes, I totally agree. And I'm so glad that you framed this whole evening as choice, because it's absolutely choice to fill out the census, to be counted. It's absolutely a choice to vote. But I think we also have more choice than that. I think we have the choice that's the civil engagement. It's not just filling out the census, but like we're in a situation where, as Nancy was saying, that we were supposed to be able to go until October 30th, and now October 31st. Now we're only allowed to go till September 30th. That's not right, so that I think part of the choice is that we now will work with Nancy and everybody else to make sure that people are counted. So the choice is not only to be counted yourself, but the choice is to get involved. Like John Lewis said, get in good trouble, right?
Mhm.
The choice is to be involved and to confront the issues that come up when things are not going as they are set up to be. We are part of a system, as we were talking about before, but the systems don't always work the way they're supposed to work. So our job is to participate in the system in a way that's going to be best for everybody. But I think our choice is also to help the system to work better when it's
Yes.
not working appropriately.
No, I totally, and that's one of the things I think you're absolutely right about. There's no perfect system. No one is perfect. No individual is perfect. So we don't have perfect candidates to elect into these offices, but we can in fact hold them accountable, and we tweak the system so that the system gets better with use, not worse. So we tweak it for improvement, and then we hold those people that we place in offices and that we give those responsibilities to, and we give that power and authority to, we hold them accountable. Because without accountability, there is chaos. There is dictators. There's all of the negative adjectives that you can think of. And it gets worse. It doesn't get better. When the people are silent, who was it? I think it was Dr. King said in one of his speeches that we won't have to apologize simply for the vitriolic words of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people.
Mhm.
That we, people who have a moral and a spiritual and a civic obligation, cannot be silent. And as I said earlier, before Arilys and Kelly came on, I'm not exempting the church and institutions of faith from that same requirement, because we have somehow or another taken a back seat to it as well. And as a result of our lack of leadership, our society falls into deprivation because the people who know better aren't doing better.
Mhm.
So that's an indictment. It's an indictment against us. It's an indictment against who we are. And I guess I said in last week's show, which was, the title was Drunk on Wine or Filled with the Spirit. And so it doesn't have to be liquid wine, but it could be the wine of the world. And when we get drunk on it, as I said, I'm not angry with drunks, but I am angry, and I take offense to those who claim to be people of faith and are not filled with the Holy Spirit. I take offense to that
Mm.
because now you play in church. We got enough of that. We don't need to do that anymore. I mean, if nothing else, the coronavirus has shown us that we're talking life and death here, and that virus hitting this nation and over 180,000 people dying as a result of it lets us know that these decisions, these choices that we make, have real consequences. Now, I don't know about you, but I know at least 60, 65 of those 180,000 I know personally.
Mm.
And that breaks my heart because they were gone too soon. Okay, that's my sermonic stuff for the night, but I just had to get that out. so come on. Now, I don't know what Nancy must have jumped off, but I didn't want her to jump off. Are you still there, Nancy? Because I don't see a picture. But anyway, but ladies, listen, I want to give the floor to you because I really want you to enlighten us a bit.
I'm here, by the way. I'm here.
Oh, well, okay, good. I didn't see your photo over there. I said, wait, okay, because it dropped down. Okay, I lost one. There we go. I see you. Thank you for being there. Thank you for not leaving us. So what I want to do is I want you to sort of give us a little bit of understanding, Kelly and Aurelius, because you were both in the meeting that previous to Matters of Faith. And I want you to give us an overview of what you did and what we can do going forward to help implement the plan.
So I'll jump in here for just a second, and Ellison, you can fill in my gaps. I want to answer the question. Can I answer the big question though first?
Most certainly can.
Because it ties in. So I really appreciate, Reverend Russell, what you just said in this whole idea of choice. I also think the census and voting are both about community and our sense of being connected and in being in community with one another. Because I may feel that I'm going to be okay, regardless of what the census outcome is, or I'm going to be okay with what, regardless of who's elected.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is we live in community. And so my selfishness to not be counted, my selfishness to not encourage other people to be counted will end up truly impacting the communities and the neighbors and the folks that I live with, because we know that to be true. So I think both of those things are a civic duty because they're a community duty.
Mm-hmm.
They are to help one another. You know, my kid goes to public school, but if I sent my kid to private school and I decided that, well, I don't really care if the local schools are funded that much, the census isn't going to really impact that much. Well, I'm hurting my neighbors. I'm hurting my community. I also think it's theological because I think that if you look at even when Jesus first launched we'll talk about from a Christian sort of perspective, but when Jesus first launched his ministry, he said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. I've been anointed to bring good news to the poor. And what we know in the Poor People's Campaign is that poor is patokos in Greek, and it's the poor who were made poor by the nation. So it is not just the poor in spirit. It's the poor who were oppressed and made poor by the nation. And he said to bring, freedom to the captive and recovery of sight to the blind and to set the oppressed free. So how do we do that? We do that systematically. We do that through systems. And so to me, that really ties that to voting, into holding our systems accountable so that we can sort of live out that ministry. I mean, that for me, joining the Poor People's Campaign was, I think, as much about my faith as anything, because it really aligned to me, we are told to do. And to be in community with one another. So tonight's program in particular was really about, it's called Voting is Power Unleashed. Okay. And it's the idea that the Poor People's Campaign does a ton of research. Like, we always believe that we got to be smarter. We got to be smarter than our opposition. We got to be at least as smart, but we probably got to be smarter. And so it's really, really research based. And what we know is that poor and low income people vote at about 20% less the rate
Yes.
of folks of higher wealth. And that is not because folks are lazy or because they're just disinterested, or we know there's a lot of reasons. We know because there's like rampant voter suppression is one. We know that transportation and accessibility to the polls is much tougher for poor and low income folks because of crazy voter hours and it not being a holiday, and you know, there's just all sorts of things. And we also know, because we seldom
Yeah.
talk about the issues that are truly important to poor and low income people,
Hmm.
that they're not being raised. We talk about this mythical middle class, you know, we talk about tax breaks, you know, we equate the economy with the stock market, which is completely not true. Like the stock market is not the economy. We don't talk about living wages. We don't talk about clean water. We don't talk about education in real terms. We don't talk about what mass incarceration does, both to individuals, to families, and to communities. We don't talk about these real issues. And so what we know is that in 16 states, if just 1 to 19%, as little as 1%, as great as 19%, more poor and low income people voted in the last election, it would have, in the 2016 election, it would have completely flipped the trajectory.
Wow.
So we know that there is power in poor and low income people. And this isn't about using people or using them to get a certain outcome and walking away. This is about empowering people to make their voice be heard, and then keeping folks organized and vocal so that not only is their voice heard on November 3rd, but their voice is heard for a long time after that.
And you know,
So,
sustainability, and that's what I'm hearing you say is sustainability. You know, for all of the, and I know you guys know it. I know it. Sit on boards and do, you know, a lot of not-for-profit work and things like that. But sustainability is critically important, because other than that, it's just an episodic thing that comes and goes, and then you wait for the next one to come up. And in the meantime, in the gap, people fall and they die. You know, and I don't mean this physically, literally, but they die in all kinds of other ways. So if it's not systemic, and if it doesn't last, then it really doesn't work. You know,
Right.
and I'm glad to hear that, because I'm familiar with the Poor People's Campaign, not as familiar obviously as you guys are, but the idea was right. When Dr. King was killed, he was on that movement, and he was right. He was absolutely 100% right. And I think that's what, more than anything else, got him killed, because as long as he was talking about civil rights, just, you know, sort of, so we can drink from the same water fountain, or we could sit on the same bench or ride in the same part of the bus. But when you start talking about economic parity, economic rights, that created a problem for America, because in order to level the playing field, in order to bring this playing field together, people with privilege have to be willing to give it up. And they're not willing to do that, you know, to a large extent. And their systems that are in place are designed to maintain that system in place. So I got to tell you, I tip my hat to you, because, you know, people who are Anglo, white, those who step up and speak out, I tip my hat to, because it means that, you know, you're willing to say, look, you know what, I'm willing to give up some of my privilege in order to make this right for everybody. That's what it takes. Because if it's just Nancy and myself and Arilys, if we're having this conversation, it's just a conversation. But when we bring in our ethnic counterparts, we can actually get some things done. So we got to broaden this conversation. We've got to expand it so that it includes everybody, so that everybody understands that anyone's death diminishes me because of mankind. I'm involved with mankind. I think it was John Donne that said that, right? That we have to live together, to work together, to become one people group, not a hodgepodge of, you know, this person, 'Cause that's what creates the issue. And most times we do it because we don't know each other. If we knew each other, we wouldn't think like that. We would understand that we're people, and people are people, and God loves his people. So,
I
Aurelis,
would-
I see you over there. You look like you want to say something. I know Nancy gonna jump right in, so I'm gonna make
No,
you
no.
say some Aurelis before Nancy. So I know she's coming.
No, I just want to say that in the meeting today, we received a lot of information and also way that people can get involved. So you can direct your people to go to vote that for people campaign that, or so they can get involved in the movement. People can become organizer, and we call it more organizer. More means stand for mobilize,
Right.
organize, register, and educate people for a movement that vote. So they can become more organizer. That means they can register people, work with people with their plan. What is your plan that you're gonna have for voting, and also in the census. So you can direct your people to there. Uh, the also for this evening, both of the candidates were invited to attend this meeting, and the Republican candidate chose not to attend, but Vice President Biden were there, and we don't endorse any candidate,
Mhm.
but we present our platform. We want him to hear, to listen what we are saying, and we want to force the conversation on poverty, and that's why he was there, and he was there also with us in April, and we were in Washington, and we did a town hall with most of the candidates, and he was there. And
Mm.
today he remembered that he was there. And even when the candidates, when they start using our research, that's when you say, okay, we're getting somewhere. Because today he mentioned 140 million of poor people. That is one of the research that the campaign have done. So I think that for me that was also very powerful today to see that, and make them to come to the table and talk with us and sit down and listen.
That's incredible. That's wonderful. That's right. If he uses your research, you know he's paying attention.
Hmm.
That's awesome. Nancy, come on, jump in there. I know you. She's smiling. She knows she's got the. She got. Go ahead.
Well, well, what I wanted to say was, I have a slight different perspective because I work throughout the whole city. And so, what's wonderful about the perspective I get to see in many ways is that I have to meet people where they are. The census is bipartisan. The census, it doesn't matter if your child goes to private school, if they get in a car and drive across the road, they are affected. So the census is very bipartisan. It's for everyone. And so in being able to work throughout the city on a bipartisan issue, you get to really truly see how close we really are to wanting the same things, and from our community and from each other. So I have been in spaces that, I may not choose to necessarily be in, but you can see the things that draw us together. And so when I work with the community that said, hey, we should focus on this issue, but maybe we don't have an issue to focus on. My kid goes to private school, I'm good. Why would I want to mobilize around this? And mobilizing around education, mobilizing for children to be counted makes everyone safe. No one is safe to walk the streets if no one's educated. If we're ignorant, we're not going to get anywhere if we're all ignorant. And so, you know, it's wonderful to speak with like-minded folks. You know, it's wonderful to hear what I want to hear, but I really do see it as a privilege walking into spaces and speaking to people who don't agree with me, don't see things the same way. But at the end of the conversation,
That's fine. That's important.
we're actually in agreement. We're actually on the same page. It's a lot of illusions about people really want and what they really care about. And so it's been an honor working with the census. And so with faith people out there, you know, I'm calling on you to activate this last month. And we are fighting. I know California has a lawsuit against them shutting this down early. The city has been fighting every step of the way. But, you know, really, with COVID being an issue, the election that's coming up, this administration, it's been hard to get the voice of the census out there. And as tirelessly as an entire team of people have been working, we still need your help. We still need faith leaders to continue to talk about the census to the very end, alongside every kind of work that you do. If you work in domestic violence, you should be talking about the census. If you work in mental health, you should be talking about the census. So I expect everyone to add the census to their agenda and to their work until this is over. And so, you know, I just wanted to say that and really appreciate the work these ladies here are doing as well, but really needed to put that out there that, you know, the census it's not about a side. It's not about being a Democrat, a Republican, conservative. It doesn't matter. You count, everyone counts, and we're all the better for it.
One of the things that takes place, I like what you said, both of you, particularly about the conversation. Once the conversation takes place, then you can begin to make some changes, and people can begin to reevaluate what their position might be. But unless there's a conversation, people hold on to their own preconceived notions, and there's no change, there's no movement, there's nothing. So as when Kelly was talking about the you know, the person whose child was in private school. Well, that's because there wasn't a broader understanding of how that information impacts everybody in the society, not just your child. It's not just you. And in fact, you know, the Bible is so clear about this. It's never been about you. It's always about God and his people. And so we got to recognize, you know, that there's a universal appeal to all of this that we're doing. It's not just you know, what's going on in your small world or centers of influence. Karen, you've been awfully quiet over there.
Well, so I do have a thought, because we were talking about before that that sometimes folks don't use their voice, that they don't claim their voice, and particularly poor people sometimes don't claim their voices. You know, as Kelly was quoting the research that was done, that poor and low income folks vote 20% less often. I think that it's very important that their voices in particular are very important. And this is one of the things that the Poor People's Campaign holds up. The voice of poor people, the voice of people who are most directly affected by the injustices in this society, are the voices that we need to listen to among the most carefully, because they know from firsthand experience what the problems are and what needs to change. And for that reason, the Poor People's Campaign is putting people in, following the Dr. King's example in 1968, is making it possible, and poor people are taking leadership in the movement, because their voices are crucial to our being able to recreate this society in the most just possible way, to really bring God's kingdom on earth.
So let me ask this question. What do we need to do to begin the process in earnest about bringing people out of poverty, out of being poor? And I heard someone say before that that poverty is a condition, but being poor is a state of mind. How do we begin the process of bringing people to a point where we bring them out of poverty, out of poorness, and into the mainstream of society so that they can become contributors, major contributors to our society, and we can eliminate that quote unquote caste of people that we call poor?
I think we have to start by changing the narrative around poverty. Not just the narrative that is being told externally, but but that then infiltrates us internally as well. We in this country blame people for poverty. We attribute it to bad decisions. We attribute it to laziness. We attribute it to lack of intelligence. We to a moral. We literally attribute it, unfortunately, in the church often to like some sort of moral failing, and that has been historical. I mean, that is ingrained in subtle and in overt ways in our culture, in just society. So I think we have to change that narrative and really understand that we live in a system that survives because of poverty. I mean, capitalism is built on there being winners and losers, and it's not because of anything that is like an intellectual flaw, or it's the way our system is built. And so until we truly understand that, then I think we can't, Dr. King talks about like flinging a coin at a beggar. Like, that's not how you change people's circumstances. Right. And so that to me, and again, it's a big reason that I'm on part of the Poor People's Campaign, because that is really one of the evils, is this like distorted moral narrative around poverty, around race, around things. And this is very, very intentional. Like, it is not a mistake that we have this narrative and that it's been perpetuated throughout history. It is very intentional because, one, it keeps us divided. It makes us like us and them. But if we really believe that 140 million people are poor and low income, that's 43% of our nation, then it's really not about the margins, it's about all of us. And so I think that is really key, is changing that narrative.
Okay. So Karen, you want to jump in on that one?
Over the last 3-4 years since the Poor People's Campaign, the current incarnation of the Poor People's Campaign has been around, we've been listening to people across the country. We've been listening to people who are facing healthcare issues, housing issues, clean water issues, unemployment issues, homelessness, and on and on and on. And out of that, the Poor People's Campaign has put together the Jubilee Platform, which I think Kelly Orabellis mentioned earlier. The Jubilee Platform, of course, references the year of the Jubilee in the Bible, where the resources are redistributed equitably. The Jubilee Platform is a list of demands that we believe need to be, it's a list of demands of things that need to change in our society. And doing those things would alleviate poverty in this country. It's not simple, but it has to be holistic. It has to be done from a variety of different places. And I don't mean to sort of, like pass the buck by not being more specific, but I would really direct people to look at the Jubilee platform on the Poor People's Campaign website, because it is a very articulate, accessible document that really lists out a lot of the things that need to change.
Do you
Now-
have an example of one or two? I'd be interested in that myself. I've never actually
Sure.
researched that one.
I mean, I'm an educator, right? By profession. So universal free childcare,
Okay.
starting with the age of 3 or 4. All children have access to quality learning experiences and education. Another one, free higher education.
Hmm.
All people have access to go as far as they want in their education without paying a dime. So nobody goes into debt. Nobody has to work 2 or 3 jobs while they're putting themselves through school. Nobody has to give up school because of whatever, or if they have a family circumstance, they go back later. But those are the kinds of things that keep people in poverty.
Yep.
Those are the kinds of things, that don't allow people, because if you don't have a family that has a little bit put away that can help you pay for college at this point,
Hmm.
much tougher.
Oh, no doubt.
It's much tougher to do that. So those are 2 little tiny examples.
Mhm.
The other thing, and I don't mean to talk too much, but the other thing that I would direct people's attention to on the Poor People's Campaign website is the moral budget. The moral budget was a document developed a year ago, published in 2019, developed in concert with the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, D.C. And what it does is it shows dollar for dollar how it's possible to pay for it all.
Hmm.
It's possible to pay for this. The other problem in our society, along with changing the narrative, is changing the belief, because it's a myth that money is scarce. It's not scarce.
No.
If we can bail out cruise companies during the COVID, then we can definitely pay people. We can definitely work it out that they're not going to lose their homes and become homeless. So anyway, the Poor People's Budget shows that if we raise taxes on folks who have way more than they need, and if we spend a little bit less on the military, that we can easily pay for all the healthcare, education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that we need in our society.
Well, I thank you for sharing that. That's really good information, and that's a good insight. I'm going to look that up myself, because I think you're absolutely right. Education is key, always has been. Higher education is critically important. Early education is critically important. I think it was Sigmund Freud who said the first 5 years of life are most important. It's where foundations are laid. That if you don't educate at those ages, you miss the greatest opportunity in the world. And from there, it's almost it's a hit or miss if you don't do it at the earlier ages, that you may not be able to catch it at all. So that's important. I have some questions for you guys, because I was looking and reading your resumes. You don't mind if I ask you some questions, because I thought about each of you. And I wanted to ask you all a question. I want to start with Karen, since you were there. Karen, talk to me for a moment about where you taught in Mott Haven. Where were you a principal at?
PS 360, I was the founding principal of PS 369 on 140th Street,
140th and what?
between Willis and Brook.
Oh, I know exactly where it is. I know exactly where it is. I'm a Bronxite, so of course I knew that.
Mhm.
So I like that. So I wanted to ask you a question really about commitment, because in order for you to do that, I know you're a PK, you're a preacher's kid. I like that about you. And I know that you are participated in working for justice and social justice, even Jesse Jackson, all that kind of stuff throughout your life. The commitment that it took for you to kind of step out and say, you know what, I'm going to the South Bronx, that location, and I'm going to head up that school. I'm help me to understand that. It's not really a question. It's just that I'm just curious.
It was an opportunity that came to me, and I was honored to take that on. It's a community that deserves the very best for their kids and it doesn't usually get it. So it was an honor and a pleasure.
Mm.
The families were wonderful. The kids were great. And it was hard. It was hard because we didn't get the, in terms of the resources, we didn't have the resources we need
Right.
to do that work. I had to, in order to get air conditioners in the building, I had to write foundation proposals. In order to get after school programming, because for any of my kids, I couldn't pay for it during the day. I had to write proposals. On top of everything else I had to do, I had to write proposals so that my kids could have an after school experience. I had to make sure that we had enough money to pay for a third meal during the day, so that when kids went home, they didn't have to rely on food being in the house. They got it in school before they left. So they ate breakfast, they ate lunch, and then they had something else before they went home. But that was not in the budget. We had to raise that separately.
And that was not in the job description either.
No, that wasn't in the job description. But that's all right. No, most of what you do is a lot of what you do is not in the job description.
But thank you for sharing that. I mean, I'm a Bronxite. I grew up in the Bronx, went through the system. I lived in it. So, when you live in it, you don't see it from a different perspective because you're in it. You can't see the forest if you're in the trees. And so it's interesting. I'm a little older than they were because when you were principal, I was long gone. But I understand, and I appreciate that. I really do, because it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to be about it. And you've certainly shown that that's who you are. And I appreciate it because it takes all of us to make it happen. By the way, let me just say this to you guys because because I had a late start because we had this problem getting on Facebook. And so I'm going to go a little over tonight. We're not going to stop exactly at 10 because I don't want to shortchange you guys from sharing because we lost about 20 minutes just trying to get everything together. So don't lose your grip right now. Aurelis, I wanted to ask you a question because you've done something I think is kind of unusual. You broke and are breaking down barriers. And I mean in your home of the Dominican Republic, because I've read throughout your bio, this relationship that you established with Haiti and the Dominican Republic. That ain't easy. So what's up with that? How did you like, I'm going to attack this thing because it's, I know you get it from both sides at that point.
Yep. Well, you know the story, right? Growing up in DR is like they would tell you that we are not black. I wasn't black, right? The black were the Haitian.
Right.
And all the hate, everything was directed to the Haitian. Just they want to make sure that we never come together again. And that was also the source for, as a black woman, or self-hate, the same that the African American and every black people go through it, right? That you grow up like hating yourself and not accepting and wanting to be something else. So I call it conversion. My conversion started when I went to work in a community-based organization, and we start visiting the batallas, and I start getting more conscious about race. Then I'm also a PK. My father was a pastor too.
Okay.
And then I went to Brazil to study theology. Then I came here. I stayed here, right? And my conscious of as a black person even grew even more. But I never forget what was happening in my country. And then we have a strong Dominican community here. So when in 2013, I learned that the Dominican has passed this law saying like if you were born in the Dominican Republic and your parents were no Dominicans, you are no longer Dominican.
Yeah.
And at that point, we were like, what? No. So we start organizing. We organized a group here called Dominican by Right.
Mm.
And so we start working on that. We did a lot of action in front of the Dominican consulate. And so we organized. We did treat then a friend of mine have organization called Punto Salud. It's Todo por la Salud, all for health, where they bring medical help to people at the border. So I start going into those mission and being with people,
Mm.
right? And working on my own on my own prejudice, because I mean, when you grow up that way, it's like a hard, right? But so for me, it was so important to really be with them, to really don't being able to see, oh yeah, sometimes people say, oh yes, I'm Haitian, because I grew up like that was the bigger insult that someone can. And for me, sometimes like so yeah, I'm from Haiti. I'm like, and I feel fine saying that. So
Mm.
yeah, it have been. So even now, my friend went. They did the mission this year in the middle of this pandemic, and this is something that I want to keep supporting.
Well, good. I'm so glad to hear, because I mean I know that there is a that can be very touchy, but
That's
you have to have
deep.
courage. Yeah, you got to have something in you. You know, you got to be willing to make that choice, to put yourself almost in harm's way in order to make it happen, because it has to happen, but somebody has to choose to do it. So
Mhm.
I tip, if I had a hat on, I tip it to you. So I tip my hat to you.
Thank you.
I'm going to leave you for last, Karen, Nancy, but I want to ask Kelly a question, because Kelly, interestingly enough, she's got corporate background, you know, and then suddenly she's like, I'm not doing corporate no more. I'm going to go over here and do this social work stuff, and I'm going to help people to do stuff. I'm going to help them break out. Now I'm coming from corporate America, you know, like the A listing of corporate America, the you know, the legal minds of the world that keep everything in place. And you left, but they had an interesting position, right? Was it a corporate strategy and um, uh, you know, that kind of thing, and diversity. So, but you left that. That's interesting to me.
Yeah. So, well, for one thing, I'm a PK too. I'm a
Oh,
preacher's kid
all
too.
these preachers. I'm the
I
preacher. I got no kids. So hey, kids.
So yeah, so I'm a preacher's kid too. So yeah, so my job was interesting because I'm about as uncorporate as you get, but through a series of and I'd actually come from a nonprofit world. I used to work for Habitat for Humanity,
Okay. No, yeah.
and directing all their volunteer programs in New York City. Um, but I had temped at a big firm, and I was going to go to law school, and I decided not to go to law school, and went into nonprofit work. And then I adopted a son
Mm,
as a single mom,
the 19.
and I was like, I kind of need better hours and a little more pay. So I went back to the law firm, kind of lured me back. And yeah, I did diversity and inclusion. So I always say I was like the little nonprofit in this big corporate law firm, because I was strictly working, doing diversity and inclusion programming. And I got to work with absolutely the best people.
Wow.
You know, I worked with all of our Black and Latino and Asian lawyers, are women, because women are still really underrepresented especially in financial law, in Wall Street law firms. I worked with our LGBT network. If you were white, straight, and male, I may not even have known your name unless you were helping me do diversity and inclusion. And yeah, but even doing that, it was a really Godspeed to people who are still doing it. I know a lot of amazing people still doing it. I did that for like 15 of the 20 years I was there, the last 15. But what I realized is that we were dealing with the symptoms, but not with the disease. So we were dealing with the fact that people of color are still woefully underrepresented in corporate America, in corporate law, in the boardrooms. But the efforts seemed so inadequate, so frustrating, and so inadequate. And it was kind of a moral dilemma to leave. I mean, not just because the money was kind of decent, because the money was kind of decent,
Yeah.
but it was also like, I do feel really passionately about that work, but I just felt like, especially in 2016, like many of us did when we when we saw what happened, and when we saw this amplification of racial violence, of racism, of marginalization of everyone, I think it just called me to like, this was no longer what I could do and feel like I was making an impact. So I left.
Well, I tip my hat to you. That's interesting because you were doing something within corporate America that essentially was sort of altruistic, but it wasn't enough. You had to do more. I like that. I think that's great. I think that's great.
I
Nancy
think
probably sitting over saying, "What are you going to ask me? What are you going to ask me?" But actually, the question I have for Nancy is kind of interesting. We kind of started a conversation a while ago about this, and I just wanted her to elaborate a bit because, she was in what I call the security of working for the city. You left that to do the census, which census only comes around once every 10 years. So, to do that, you have to be thinking beyond yourself because this is not really something that you look at. I'm going to build my career working with the Census Bureau. So Nancy, talk about your courage, because that's what I call it, it's courage.
So, yeah, no, I've lived a few lives, so I can totally relate to Kelly. Earlier in my career, I was an attorney recruiter, so I worked with all the big ones. You looked so familiar, Kelly, when you got on. And we could really talk about law firms.
let's do that. Let's you and I chat later.
I would love to. And the whole diversity and inclusion and how that worked and the whole system, because there too was a system that you don't see right away, that's sort of invisible, that prevents certain things from happening and certain people being hired. And so the changes are way more sophisticated than people can imagine. It's not just about hiring someone. It's about the process and the livelihood and life longevity of a lawyer, right? And what that really means. But anyway, let's not go there right now. But I would, to answer the question, because I find that conversation fascinating. But to tell you the truth, I really got passionate. Like I got pissed. I was in a meeting and someone came in and they started talking about the census. And, this is with a political science degree, went to NYU for social work, for graduate program. And, I raised a son in public school. My son went to school in Tribeca though, I had the resources to look outside of necessarily where I was or where I was living at the time. And I will tell you that I thought I was in the know of, of what was going on. I went to, help free Mumia. I was upset about Move. I was a teenager. This is like, this is not new in terms of being civic minded. So you guys, dads are all pastors. My dad is an activist in his community. He's from Somalia, and he's, that guy, who came here in the 60s. To the United States, not as an immigrant that was running from poverty, but actually as an immigrant who wanted to see the world and who wanted to, wanted to explore. And a mother that came from Venezuela to want to come to the United States to be a doctor, because as a woman, her father was no longer going to pay for school. And so, realizing that, you could be stopped in your tracks for being a woman, and your father not paying for school for you can just stop your dreams. These are the parents that I grew up with. And I had the privilege and honor of going to school at a time in Harlem. I went to PS 129, where I was taught by civil rights activists. I have always been civic minded. And so when I realized what the census really meant, when I understood the 3/5 compromise, I had studied that, but it didn't connect. It did not connect, that this is about taxation and representation. And it made, when I understood the 3/5 compromise, which is in short, very simple, the North saying to the South, you can't count your slaves. You said they're not people. And the South basically saying, oh, let's compromise. Because why the compromise? The compromise was so that the South could get the count, the South can get the numbers, because it was important, because it brings power, electoral votes, everything. So being counted, it just for, even for the African American community, and especially the immigrant community, it's also not doing the census robs you of your dynasty. You as an immigrant should be able to say, this community lived here for 100 years, and then the Caribbean community, the Haitian community moved into Flatbush, and be able to trace not only your history, but your contributions to this state and this city. So there's a lot lost in history and dynasty, in being able to track and historically place what you have contributed to society and to this country, which has been so much that has not been really told, right? And not been really, that information that, New York, was basically feeding the Caribbean and basically subsidizing slavery, right? Right off the tip of Wall Street, is part of an ability to know your history and understand really how we got here, all of us, including immigrants, all of us. And I think that I got so pissed off. I was like, if I don't know this, that means no, I just felt like, I felt like, I still get upset thinking about it, because I was looking at my degree. I was like, I went to a great state school. How did I graduate not really understanding the political system in a way that I can manipulate it? And that's the problem. We don't understand it well enough to understand how it really, really works to our benefit. So, the census, I said, you know what? It was a risk, leaving the community affairs unit of the mayor's office to go to do the census on a temporary basis. But it was a risk that I was willing to take. I think it was, I know, and I have learned a lot. I have engaged with the community in wonderful ways. So I've gotten a lot out of this process, and just saddened that we were sort of hindered by coronavirus. Um, uh, you know, just I can't tell you how much we wanted to do way more, and it's not too late. We can still try to push these numbers up. And I really truly believe if the community really understood the census, really understood how it works, and not just today for this census, but for the next one. You know, the problem was it was a huge task in trying to educate an entire city almost, where you know, about something where people were having the same reaction I was. You know, I had someone who was an administrator of a school, not a public school, but a school, a private school. When I told them that the federal dollars were per child per community, they said that's not true. And I said, yes, it is. And we went over it. So, you know, people who are educated do not truly understand the impact. So, what I can say is that the first step is that you have to exist, right? Voting, we must do. But for the long haul, if your child is 10 now, we're not doing the census again till your child is 20. So these effects, this impact, we're stuck with way past an election. Local politics is sometimes way more important than even what's happening on the federal level sometimes. Who's running the city on the ground, who is being counted, whose voices are heard is critical in local, in not in a city, and for the poor and for everyone. So I honestly did it because I felt that I could find something else at some point, that I would gain the opportunities to find something else. But most of all, I was so passionate about it. And when someone said that they announced that they were looking for a faith manager for the census, I was with a team of my team, my coworkers, and everyone turned and looked at me and said, that's her, because I started talking about the census before I was even hired to do the census. I immediately, as soon as it clicked, I was doing everything and talking about the census. So my colleagues were like, just this is your thing. And so, just like many of these women here, you just get the spirit, and there's just, it sometimes doesn't even make logical sense for everybody else, but it just felt like something I really, really, really had to do. And this community is very important to me. New York is, I'm a New Yorker, I'm born and raised here. I had a great education here. Um, I love this city. And you know, the nonprofit organizations, the arts classes, the programs that I attended, um, made me who I am today. It wasn't just my family, but it was also the exposure to these things, because we were poor. And my mom suffered with mental health issues.
Mm.
And so these programs, these good schools saved my life. And so it upsets me that children are being cheated because people just don't understand what's going on. It just saddens me to no end. So that's why I did it. But yeah, I've been around. I also worked at the DA's office. I worked with major law firms, but I've done all of that. But um, this I felt like was a calling. I couldn't do anything else.
Well, I tell you, I'm humbled. I'm humbled at all of you, because you literally have stepped out, you shine, and you continue to be bright. Um, James Burns said something, you probably never even heard of this man, but says too many people are thinking of security instead of opportunity. They seem more afraid of life than death. So I want to do something, and I'm going to do a couple of things. One, I want to share just for a moment briefly information about the Jubilee platform. So I'm going to put that on the screen for those people to write down. I want you to write this down because I want you to go and research what Karen was talking about. So it's now on your screen. You can check it out. I want you to take a look at that. I'm not going to keep it up long, but I just want to keep it up so that you can be able to see it, write it down, and take note. And then follow it up, look it up, see what they're recommending, because that's one of the things that they're holding the candidate who's running for public office accountable to. And I think that that's a good thing, because we've got to come out systemically from the idea of poverty and poorness, and we've got to put people in the mainstream of life. And if there's a platform for it that can get that done, I am absolutely 100% all for it. We need to do that and do it now, because it's critically important. Then the other thing I need to do is I want to close out. We've gone a little over our normal time, but we had, as I said, we had a little bit of a delay. So I want to share with you what the Lord had placed on my heart to close out with. Okay, so listen to this. This is interesting, right? Start by doing what's necessary, then what's possible, and suddenly you are doing the impossible. St. Francis of Assisi said that. Doing what's necessary, doing the possible, even the impossible, is a matter of choice. When you decide to do the necessary, to do what's possible, the impossible becomes normal. It takes an intentional effort to make the impossible possible. In other words, we must make a choice to be intentional about making a difference in your life, a difference in the lives of others, a difference in our community, a difference in the country, and a difference in the world. What I like about the privilege of choice is that every choice we make can be life altering. It can be for good or it can be for bad. The condition of our lives today, just like it was for the Israelites, is contingent on the choices we make. Each one of my guests tonight have shared how their choices are helping to reshape not just our community, but the world. Participating and encouraging others to participate in the census is a choice that will impact our present as well as our future. Voting and encouraging others to vote impacts our lives today, tomorrow, and forever. Today, because you will be exercising your God-given privilege, is the greatest thing that you can do. It is not only your civic responsibility, it has divinity in it. So you got to get with it today. Tonight, my guests have helped us to see how choices can and do shape the very nature of our existence. It may look like it has no eternal implications. Oh, but they do. Choice is a gift from God. And one day you will have to decide, just as Joshua had to, whom you will ultimately serve. I don't know about you, but I've made a decision that is for me and my house, we too will serve the Lord. So I want to thank my guests, Karen,
Amen.
Aurelis, Kelly, and Nancy. The three women at the top, all of the Poor People's Campaign, and Nancy, the New York City Census 2020 Faith Manager. Also, our sponsors, the JLR Company. For all of your financial needs, call 718-328-8096, because it's not about the castle. And you heard that tonight. It's about the kingdom. Matters of Faith, the book. I told you that's at my Cash App, cash.me. Book's $20 plus $2.80 for shipping and handling, or you can get it as an ebook. That was on the screen a while ago, so you can see that as well. Use the coupon and you get a 25% discount. Don't forget Neighbors Home Care are still looking for those certified home health aides and certified personal care workers. 718-515-2200. And finally, listen to this. Read the Bronx Chronicle on a regular basis. I only read the article a couple of times, maybe once, I think, during the show. But there are other articles of interest in that newspaper, in addition to Matters of Faith. Not many, but there's some. So make sure you read that, okay? Do that. Now, if you remember that Jesus said, in this life, you will have trials and tribulations. Also remember that all things work together for good to those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose, so that we may be conformed to his image. Romans 8:28 and 29. Until next week, Now, by the way, this is a listing. I want you to listen to this very carefully because these are titles of shows that I've done since COVID struck, starting with Stay Safe, Stay Healthy, Build Your Immune System, Maintain Your Sanity, Stay Encouraged, Love One Another, Breathe Deeply, Handle Your Earthly Obligations, Take It to Another Level, Have Faith that Takes You Above and Beyond, Exercise Self-Control, Act Justly, Love Mercy, Walk Humbly Before Your God. Remember that we are all in this together. Make a glorious and new beginning, build a network of mutuality. Know that the Lord has already made a way. No matter how bad it gets, make sure that you do your part, listening for the voice of the Lord, experiencing a shared peace, keeping up the fight for your own well-being, managing the gifts God has so graciously given you, living like you're free, coming out from among them. Know that God always does things for your good. Decide not to be drunk with wine, but be filled with the Spirit, and make your choices matter. Remember, it's always a matter of faith. Now, the Lord bless you, the Lord keep you, the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Join me again next week at the same time, whether we're on Facebook or on YouTube. I don't care. Just be there because I want to do this again. I love you, and there's absolutely nothing that you can do about that. Now, by the way, I want to ask you one question, ladies, because we really didn't get on Facebook, and my big audience is on Facebook. We may have to do this again, not on a Monday night, but on a special night before the end of the month, Nancy, so that we can put this out again. So if you guys will remain and commit to that, I'll give you a call and we'll set a date. I don't know what the date and time is, but we'll have to do it. It won't be 2 hours, but we can do it in 40 minutes to an hour. We can make sure we get everything done. Is that fair? Okay, good. So
Yeah.
check this out. Everybody just do one thing for me. God bless you. I love you. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. So get used to it. Good night and God bless. I'll see you
God bless
at
you.
another time, another station.
You will.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Take care.